Namaskar. I've experienced in my own life, and so many times in the people that I guide in their spiritual practice and meditation, that after starting a practice of meditation, there can be a real acceleration of a sort of joyful process of transformation, learning, growth, expansion, and a kind of like dissolving of old blockages. I felt like it was, like a type of healing that happens, but from like the deepest layer, maybe even almost re-breaking a bone that had been badly healed, but then, putting it in the right position, and then everything else just kind of aligning around it. So why is that? And how does that work? I'm going to be using a pizza dough metaphor. When we want to understand the process of transformation, we have to understand a bit this universal, law of nature. Just as in the law of physics, we have conservation of energy, this kind of law of action and reaction, what goes up must come down. There's a similar law on a spiritual level. And this is, many people refer to it as the law of karma, but karma is actually the active stage, what we call it when it's in its potential stage or the stored stage is samskara. This is the more accurate term. So it's similar to in physics, if you have a ball that is in motion, it's full of kinetic energy. And then when it stops, it is now that kinetic energy has been converted into potential energy. And when it begins moving again, then that potential energy is reconverted back into kinetic energy. So on the spiritual level, when it's in action, when it's in movement, that's karma. No, that's the active stage of the cycle. But when it's in a stored form, when it's just an impression, when it's full of potential energy that's not yet manifesting, that's samskara. To my pizza dough model, if you've ever made pizza, you knead the dough, you make a nice round ball of dough, and you go and you put it in the corner and you let it rise, and it like triples in size, and it becomes really, the surface of that bread dough is so nice and smooth. My mom, when she was teaching me to cook, said it's like a baby's bottom, like should be very smooth like that and soft. And then what do? No, then you have to take the air out of it. So you kind of punch it with your knuckles, and it forms all kinds of distortions. No, you're making all kinds of impressions in the pizza dough, and it loses that nice, smooth, perfect, round shape. And now it's all, all kind of distorted with impressions. So that imprinting of impressions into that soft pizza dough is samskara. That's now like a dent in the dough. That is waiting to express. What's going to happen is we leave the dough again to sit, and as it expands, all of those dents are going to work themselves out. And within an hour or so, you've got that nice smooth baby bottom, texture again of the pizza dough. It's all nice and even and smooth. So everything in nature is kind of trying to move back to a stage of homeostasis, back to a balance. And our minds are also trying to free themselves of all these distortions. It's kind of a natural progression. This is happening very slowly, like these impressions are being released, through all the different actions that happen in our lives. But when we meditate, the reason why life becomes so much more vibrant, so much more exciting, and there's so much more growth and change and acceleration is because the process of meditation, when you are meditating, you're kind of identifying your mind, not with its distortion state, but with its original, pure, expanded, smooth state. And so you're helping your mind to expand much more rapidly, as you ideate, as you think, as you do the process of meditation, and you're using the mantra, and you're identifying your mind with supreme consciousness. That effort to move in that direction frees up all of these distortions in the mind, and the mind expands. And as the mind's expanding, those distortions are getting worked out more quickly than just if they were happening slowly through the usual process of just, living life. Like when you meditate, sometimes you don't even necessarily realize that anything's happening, but you might feel some emotional release, and you don't have words for it. You don't know where it's exactly coming from. Maybe a tear is rolling down your cheek as you meditate, and some beautiful, blissful kind of sensation might be inside. It's not painful, but something's getting released. That's the mind expanding, and something's getting released. So there is deep personal transformation happening, but it's different than the more analytical process. For example, if you go to different therapies, you're kind of like concentrating on the dents, and you're like, where did that dent come from? Oh, that dent looks like it's from this kind of, it got pushed in like that. Okay, and you're trying to bring it to awareness to like free each little dent on its own and understand it, and like this. And it's also a valid and complementary practice that can also enhance growth. I'm not criticizing it. It's just, it's different. It's a different process. You're more concentrating on the dents, you can say, whereas the yogic practice, you're more concentrating on, you're re-identifying the mind with its purity, with its baseline state that you're trying to return to. And so in that process, it's a synthetic process rather than an analytical process. The distortions are working themselves out without you concentrating on them directly. It's in a metaphoric way, there's a way of referring to the supreme consciousness. One of the words for the supreme is Hari. It means ones who steals. And our master had a really cute way of talking about this. He's like, so Hari means one who steals, but, stealing, it's against Yama and Yama. How can he steal? But, those spiritual aspirants, those devotees, they will give anything to God, but they don't want to give their sins, They don't want to give their suffering. They don't want to give the bad things. They only want to offer beauty, wonderful things. So what does he have to do? He has to steal. He wants to help them to progress. He wants them to grow. So he just has to lighten their burden and take it off of them. So somehow this is metaphoric, but that's what it feels like. It feels like sometimes things that I just don't even know what happened to them. I don't know when it left me, when it dissolved, but something changed. I used to be so inhibited and shy, and not very comfortable expressing, public speaking. Things like this were anxiety provoking. And it's not that I did anything specific. It was just that through that process of expansion, through that process, some of those fears just dissolved. At some point, they just weren't there. They had just evaporated. No other types of complexes, other types of inhibitions or negative thinking, like about, I'm not creative. I had received this message once from a teacher, and it really affected me as a teenager, and affected my self-confidence for a long time. And again, it wasn't something that I did therapy on, or that I did something directly to try and solve, but just through the process of meditation, that kind of complex just dissolved. And I started to have access to a whole nother level of creativity, a whole nother level of, confidence that I didn't even know was there. It was like, by doing this process, sometimes this also happens, like new abilities, skill is something you have to work at. So it's not exactly skill, but like new talents surface. Life is simply becomes really rich. This is my experience. I've seen so much transformation, and quite quickly in the people that I guide. Whereas generally people have this idea, especially as you get older, that, oh, you really can't, people don't change much. There's nothing you can do to change them. Well, you can't change them from outside. But if people are undergoing this inner process, it's marvelous to see how much expansion, how much growth, how much uncovering of potential there really can be. And that's that pizza dough, the pizza dough that is just expanding and releasing all of those distortions, with or without your conscious will being involved, with or without your focusing on it or you're trying to do it. You're only focusing on one thing, and that is the supreme consciousness. But by focusing on that one thing, everything else kind of is getting worked out. So this is one of the special benefits, side effects. It's not the reason why you do meditation. Do meditation for spiritual growth, for expansion. Well, anyway, there's many reasons you start out meditating. Might just be to solve stress, to sleep better, and that's okay. Wherever we start at, that's where we start at. But as we go deeper into it, we discover there's just so much more and more and more. And especially if you start to meditate regularly and deeply and seriously and start to experience even small moments of expansion, then this effect of the samskara being burned, of the samskara being released, of making your mind more free is going to be happening more and more. Now there's going to be a second part of this, which is, your mind has become nice and smooth again. And then it's kind of like you go back into the world and it's just like the pizza dough is getting punched down. You go back into the world of action and what happens? Tunk, 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 you get full of impressions again. No. So how do we become truly free if we experience this expansion, this liberation, this transformation, but then we go and again, the mind's all distorted. So we have to learn to identify with the Supreme Consciousness, not only when the eyes are closed, but also when the eyes are open, and if we develop a type of way of being in the world where we're in the world, but where our mind is allowing, the Supreme Consciousness to flow through us. And we're thinking that not just the ego, I do, I did, wow, that's amazing what I did, This kind of things develop our pride, our ego, and create more distortions in the pizza dough. So if we're living our lives with this type of practice of not only seeing Bhavanam Kevalam in our inner space, but also seeing it all around us. So the Bhavanam Kevalam mantra that you use for the basic meditation in our course, that Kevalam word is the word that means only. And there's two ways I like to think about it. Kevalam meaning like only, like I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm pointing my mind only to one thing, and that is the supreme nucleus inside of me. That little spark that joins me to the great, to the limitless. That's one direction of Kevalam when you're using it internally to meditate. And the other direction is to use it externally, to use it as you walk through the world, as you interact, as you're engaging in your ordinary activities, so that your mind doesn't re-distort, and get full of more ego impressions. If you're maintaining that kind of spirit of thinking that it's that supreme consciousness that is working through me. You have, you focus on doing your best, doing the right action, but letting go of the fruits of the action, not doing it because you want a reward or you're afraid of a punishment. Those create impressions on the mind. You're waiting for the reward, it's an impression. You're afraid of the punishment, it's an impression. You're thinking, oh my God, what did I do? It's an impression, it's another distortion in the mind. It's something else that's going to have to get worked out. But if as you're doing actions, you are developing this spiritual attitude of surrender, of letting go, then as you do the action, your mind's not getting distorted. No, you're staying in the awareness, not of just ego, you're staying in the awareness of consciousness. Who is actually the doer and the ultimate, source of everything. So you're simply aligning yourself with truth. It's not a magic formula. It's simply, to become aligned with and to remember reality, that you're not alone, that there is a great force working through you. And when you become aligned with that, then your mind is truly starting to become free. Because you do the meditation, mind expands, releases samskara. You go in the world, you continue to maintain that expanded state of awareness. You don't contract back down into all of these desires and manipulations and impressions and fears and things like this. You stay in a surrendered, open, and spiritual flow. So try this out. Try using Bhavanam Kevalam in these two directions. Try integrating it into your daily life as you're acting in the world, and see how it works. Give me some feedback in your comments below, and I'm interested to hear how your experience of applying it will work. And continue. If you haven't done it already, take the basic course, but continue meditating so that you really can benefit from that acceleration, that kind of joyful acceleration of learning and growth and transformation in your life. Namaskar.